as an ophthalmologist. Over to you, sir, Professor Dua.
Well, thank you very, very much, Mahipal, and I'm really privileged, honored, and grateful for choosing me as your guest lecturer. I'm also grateful for the very kind words you said earlier on in your introduction. This topic is a very unconventional topic, and the talk itself is very unconventional, as you will see as we go along. These are learning points from my life experience, my professional life experience, that is, and hope to pass on some messages to all of you. Life is the summation of the opportunities that present and the choices one makes when those opportunities present. My first opportunity was in school. It was my first encounter with destiny. I always wanted to join the Indian Air Force like my father, who retired as an Air Commodore. The uniform and the discipline really attracted me. But he said, no, you're going to graduate from university first before you join the Air Force. So it was a natural that I take up a degree in aeronautical engineering and become an engineer before I joined the Air Force. So I took physics, chemistry, and mathematics as my subjects at the age of 14, which is what we had to do then. If you took physics, chemistry, and biology, you became a doctor. If you took physics, chemistry, maths, you became an engineer. So I was in Air Force Central School in New Delhi, physics, chemistry, mathematics. 7 days before start of school, I was in the boarding school. I met a friend, Kanwaljit Singh Sarai. We became very good friends. But on the first day in school, in class, he did not turn up. I was very worried, what happened to him? Why didn't he come to class? The first lesson was over, the second lesson was over, and then we had the small break. And I went out and I saw him playing in the playground. I said, where have you been? He said, where have you been? I said, well, I've been in the class. He said, no, I've been in the class. Then he looked at me and said, which class? I said, that one. He said, oh, that's mathematics. I'm in biology, come over. So I picked up my bag and moved to 9B, and then I became a doctor. So that was my first encounter with destiny. Whatever you do, do it well. You can succeed in anything you take on, even if it is not your first choice. This was the Government Medical College and Hospital, Nagpur, India, my alma mater, and very fond memories of my days over there. Through MBBS, in the final year, I met Professor Ishwar, and many in this hall might know him or know of him. It is said by Henry Adams, a teacher affects eternity. He can never tell where his influence stops. Find inspiration and be inspired. He made me sit the MP Ophthalmic Award examination, which was for final year students before you started a career in ophthalmology. It was for everybody to sit. I sat that exam. I got the first prize from amongst the 12 or 13 students who sat that exam, and that was 25 rupees. I then joined ophthalmology, became a registrar, lecturer, and a reader in ophthalmology in Nagpur. And I did my MBBS, DO, MS, MNMS, PhD under Professor Ishwar supervision. So the first thing is do the basics right. Get interested in research. And by research, I mean ask a simple question and try and find the answer if the books don't give you the answer. That is the simplest definition of research, and everybody should encourage themselves or their students to do research to some extent. I have written an editorial in a Brazilian ophthalmology journal because my friend is an editor, is the editor of the journal. He said, can you write me an editorial? And everybody knows this. The eye cannot see what the mind doesn't know. What the eye doesn't see and the mind doesn't know doesn't exist, as far as you're concerned. That was D.H. Lawrence who said that. But I took it a step further. There's a difference between seeing and looking. Only when one can look at something and see beyond what the mind knows can new discoveries be made. If we can only see what the mind knows, then we will never see beyond that and never find anything new. That's what happened with Archimedes when he discovered the principle of flotation. That's what happened with Newton when he saw the apple falling and he found gravity from that, and with Alexander Fleming and the discovery of penicillin. So taking a moment to pause and think of what we see is all that is needed to allow the eye to see what the mind does not know. Seek opportunity if opportunity does not seek you. If you don't find opportunity coming your way, go find it. And that was my first opportunity. I was a reader in ophthalmology in Nagpur. I said, I have to go abroad and learn something, because there was a kind of a glass ceiling. There was a kind of I've reached where I can here. And I went down to Huddersfield in England and became an SHO. So it's like a game of snakes and ladder. The snake gets you near 100 and you go all the way down. And in Huddersfield, everybody said to me, this is a district general hospital. You must get into a teaching hospital. You will go far if you're in a teaching hospital, not if you're in a district general hospital. So I applied for an SHO's job in Nottingham. This is way back in 1984. I was not even shortlisted. Then I went to Aberdeen, where there was a locum job as a SHO and a registrar advertised. And there I met my first mentor in the UK, but my second mentor after Ishwar Chandra. And he took me under his wing, and I became a registrar with him. He was a specialist in uveitis, so my first interest was uveitis. But the important thing is you find a mentor, befriend him and her, and make it a lifelong relationship. Even to this day, I correspond with John Forrester. I correspond with my other mentor I'll tell you about, but unfortunately Ishwar Chandra is no more. There, with John Forrester, I came across this patient with a corneal abrasion. And like everybody, I measured the longest dimensions of that. But what struck me was not that there was a large abrasion in the center, but there was a large area of the epithelium in the periphery that had not sloughed off despite the extensive nature of this injury. And I asked myself this question, why is the glass half full, instead of asking why is it half empty, which everybody does. And then we were able to define the first set of rules of corneal epithelial wound healing, which is that an abrasion like this does not heal by forming circles of reducing diameter, but instead from the remaining intact epithelium, 3, 4, or 5 convex sheets of cells appear. They meet each other to undergo contact inhibition, form geometric shapes, which then close by forming dendritic or pseudodendritic lines, which are essentially Y-shaped contact lines, very much like the sutures of the lens, which is also the meeting point of epithelial cells. And bits of the Y can be missing to give you the pseudodendritic shape or this kind. And this happens consistently every time an abrasion with an intact limbus heals. So take a look here. This one, the convex sheets are coming. You get the quadrilateral shape and then the Y-shaped contact lines. This lasts for a few hours and then it disappears. You take a look here, a nice pentagon of a healing abrasion, the geometric shape, and here's your Y-shaped line. Here's a quadrilateral, and here's your Y-shaped line. So very consistently this happens. This did not require any instrument of any magnitude, just looking with a slit lamp, fluorescein, and you find a completely new pattern of healing which was never described before. But obviously, while you're looking for patients with an intact limbus and an abrasion, you find patients where the limbus is involved. And you look at that closely, and what you find is the second set of rules by which every abrasion with an involved limbus will heal. From the remaining intact corneal epithelium, these tongue-shaped projections appear. They migrate in a circumferential direction, as you see here, till the limbus is re-epithelialized, and then it becomes like a limbus, like a cornea with an intact limbus with a central abrasion, and it follows the first set of rules. So take a look here. That is preserved. Limbus from there to there is preserved, but these tongue-shaped projections are starting. They are migrating circumferentially, preferential circumferential migration along the limbus. They move till they meet. In the meantime, the conjunctiva is also migrating in a centripetal direction, and when these meet, then it becomes like an abrasion with an intact limbus. Cornea heals with corneal epithelium, conjunctiva heals with conjunctival epithelium, and normality is restored. And you can see already that contact line beginning to appear, which will eventually become a Y. Take a look at this one here. The same thing, tongue-shaped projections coming in. They meet. There is a line, and there's a triangular shape. When that will move in, it will give you the Y-shaped contact lines as it did, as you see over here. So this is consistent pattern of healing of corneal epithelial wounds when the limbus is involved. But then clinically, what was more important was the third set of rules, that in some cases, before these can meet, the conjunctiva will grow in, and you will get an area of conjunctivalization of the cornea, which is thin, irregular, attracts blood vessels, and is essentially a sector of limbal stem cell deficiency. So here's an example. You can see that much limbus is surviving. This conjunctiva has survived. Cells are growing from the limbus. They are migrating true to form in the circumferential direction, but this conjunctiva has moved in, has crossed the limbus. You've got a mixture of conjunctival and corneal epithelium over here, and then you're going to get a problem, and that problem you will see is that conjunctivalization of the cornea attracting blood vessels and area of stem cell deficiency. All this we did with John Forrester and published papers. And there I learned that your teachers and your trainers will always stand by you. They will back you, they will support you, and you have to cherish this relationship, because this relationship is as important to them as it is to you, because you will carry their name forward, and anything wrong you do will reflect on them. So you have to keep that relationship, that sensitive balance, as you deal with your teachers and your trainers. And you have to become a doctor, in our case an ophthalmologist, before you become a subspecialist. Nowadays, our residents in the third year tell us, I want to be glaucoma or cornea or something, and we say, shut up, first become an ophthalmologist. And learn to walk before you run. I don't have to say that again. Now, having done what I did in Aberdeen, I had the opportunity to go to the States. And from being a senior registrar, which was being just one step from a consultant, I went down to the States and became a fellow. And there I called my mom to say, I'm going to the States now to do a fellowship. My mom said, look, you went from Nagpur, now you've gone to Aberdeen, now you've gone to Huddersfield and Aberdeen, and now do you want to settle in life? So I told her, there's a difference between stagnation and settlement. If you're stagnating, the water is still settled, but it's not the same as settling in life. And I said, no, I'm going to go ahead, because education and training are priceless investments with lifelong dividends. So I went from a reader to a fellow, half my salary, but I was learning more. So I was making progress in my profession, although not in my bank balance. So avail as many opportunities to learn as you can get. And that is very, very important. I don't know who said this, but it's a very important quotation. A doctor is a student all his life. In other words, when he or she ceases to be a student, he dies. And that's what happens. 80 to 90% of what I do today is not what I learned as a registrar or as a fellow. I had to learn it as a professor, as a reader, and in my career even to this day. And even from this conference, I have learned few things already, which I will take back and apply. So you are always a student. There I met these other two mentors, Professor Larry Donoso in research and Peter Leibson in cornea in the Wills Eye Hospital. And at that time, this paper had appeared that you get this hurricane keratitis in patients with corneal graft, this whirl pattern of healing epithelial cells, which the authors had said is because of the sutures. And we all believed that. And then this patient came along, no sutures, no graft, and he's got a beautiful whirl pattern on the cornea. So clearly, what people say and claim in books is not always right. And this theme will come up again. Question what you read if it doesn't add up. So here you see this patient with a beautiful whirl, and then we obviously looked at it carefully, and we were able to tell you a vortex keratopathy, which is defined, a whirl pattern defined by pigment, which patients are asymptomatic, and this hurricane where there is staining of the cells, and the patients have some irritation, but it eventually disappears, and that's the difference. But both of these, you can see the whirl is clockwise. And the question here was, why is this almost always clockwise? Why is not random? And we said, well, let's look at the eye. And the eye is a dipole, which is electronegative in the front, positive in the back. 6 millivolt difference current flows from the front to back. And we know that corneal epithelial cells respond to magnetism and electricity and gravity. So there's galvanotaxis, galvanotrophism, and magnetotaxis and magnetotrophism. So it may be that because this is positive and you have the right-hand rule that the current flows from front to back, the electromagnetic waves will be in a clockwise direction of the eye. And that will mean centripetally migrating cells will be diverted clockwise because of the electromagnetic fields. So we said, let's test it out. So we grew cells on magnets, and we found that the cells on magnets, these are corneal epithelial cells, start to form a whirl in culture, and that whirl becomes tightened and tighter and tighter, and then it forms a complete whirl like this. And over time, as the cells grow, the whirl unfurls and disappears into the periphery. So you could make these whirls form in culture on magnetic, with bar magnets beneath the culture plate. And these are some examples, and these I can guarantee you are not of the Whirlpool galaxy from outer space, because this is the Whirlpool galaxy from outer space. So you can see how these cells grow in these whirl pattern, and is a basis, at least one basis for which you might see these whirl patterns on the cornea. While I was at the Wills Eye Hospital in Philadelphia having lunch one afternoon, the phone rang and somebody said, is Dr. Dewar here? And I said, yeah. He said, this is for you. And that was a long-distance phone call from the member of the Senate of the University of Nottingham, who said, we have the chair of ophthalmology in Nottingham. Would you be interested in joining? The same place where I was not listed as shortlisted as an SHO. So that was my second encounter with destiny. And the lesson is, no matter how many snakes you encounter in your path, you will eventually hit the ladder, which will take you to the sky, and then sky is your limit. So when you reach a certain level in life, in your professional life, you have to define your niche. Carve yourself a niche. It may be clinical, it may be scientific, whatever, and project yourself at meetings and conferences. The same thing, just to give you one example, where you see this conjunctiva has already grown on the cornea. There is corneal epithelium, there's conjunctival epithelium, there's stem cell deficiency. All you have to do is scrape it away and let it repopulate from the remaining intact epithelium, a technique we introduced called sequential sector conjunctival epitheliectomy, because you may have to do this more than once, and you can see that healthy corneal epithelium comes over the visual axis. Vision improves within a matter of days, and you don't have to do any more as long as the pupil is covered with corneal epithelium, and it became a very simple technique to restore vision in patients like this. From that, we went on to stem cell transplantation, doing limbal transplants from autologous other non-affected eyes, as you see over here. We went on to do cadaver limbal transplants and defined and set up the whole niche. My niche became ocular surface reconstruction, stem cell transplantation, which is what I did as my subspecialty interest for a long time. And in the context of that, we came up with this classification of chemical burns, because the current classification was not up to scratch. It did not meet. It was decided and defined at a time when concept of limbal stem cell transplantation did not exist. So it had to be revisited, and we did that. In dealing with these patients, we had a lot of corneal vascularization. We studied corneal vessels in detail. We came across a lot of findings which were hitherto unknown, and we were able to come up with a technique to completely close these vessels, which we now call fine needle diathermy occlusion of corneal vessels, because even today your anti-VEGFs will not work on mature and established vessels. They only work on active young and active old vessels. So you have to combine fine needle diathermy occlusion with anti-VEGF injection, and that is now standard practice across the world. Here's an example. Again, you can see how that eye with fine needle diathermy becomes like this. All the vessels are gone. And we also came up with this alcohol delamination for recurrent corneal erosion syndrome. You take it away with alcohol 20% for 30 seconds, and you get an 85% plus success rate. But at this point, when you're doing all these things, you are creating new knowledge, you are understanding and applying new knowledge, you should always step back and pause. And this is my favorite quote. To ask a question is the beginning of learning. To answer the question is a test of knowledge. But to question the answer is the start of wisdom. And you have to find answers and you have to question those answers, even if you have provided those answers yourself. Always question those answers. And here it was a surprise to me. All my life I've talked about the limbus and the importance and stem cells, and these patients come along with completely clear corneal epithelium in the center, but completely destroyed limbus. So how can this sheet support itself when there are no stem cells? And we were able to show that the corneal epithelium can regenerate from the basal epithelium in the absence of a limbus in normal physiological state. And it's only when there's injury that the limbal stem cells are necessary. So I had to question my own answers and had to find new answers because what I had done was partly correct and not totally correct. In all of this, you're not alone. Many, many people. Don't forget your juniors, the smallest and the youngest, on to your seniors and your colleagues who are helping you. You are part of a team, and you have to be a team player. I was once in my clinic seeing patients, and a new nurse had just come, and she was a senior nurse, and I saw 3 or 4 patients, and she stood there and then said, oh, seeing there's nothing for me to do, can I go? I said, no. Seeing that there's nothing for you to do, can you please bring me a cup of tea? And she said, what, me in my blue uniform, you expect me to bring you a cup of tea? I said, sorry, I asked. I said, I make a cup of tea for my wife every day, and if you were working and I was standing here, I'd be more than happy to make you a cup of tea. And then in a flash of inspiration, I said, by the way, 3/4 of team is tea. So if you're going to be a team, you have to make me tea. And she looked at me and said, for that, I will make you tea. And she brought me a cup of tea. So you respect your colleagues. Peer recognition is the highest form of recognition. Your teachers will say you're great, your students will say you're great, but your colleagues will be the last person to say you're great. And when their colleagues say you're great or you're good or you're right, you have arrived. So peer recognition is to be respected. And I got that in many forms. Many people corroborated my findings in research and supported it with randomized controlled trials. And then this last bit everybody knows. We came across this layer, the Duer's layer, the pre-Decimus layer. We were able to describe 3 different kinds of bubbles, which are now universally accepted across the world, but they were not initially. And I spoke to colleagues here already, juniors who are trying to prove a new point, and they are feeling resistant. That is natural. You have to accept that, and then keep throwing the evidence, not at anybody, but in the literature, in the public domain. And the evidence will speak for itself. You don't have to prove by shouting on the top of your voice. Let the evidence prove that. And this was my Eureka moment when we created a bubble of the type 1, and we were able to peel off the entire Decimus membrane, and the bubble did not deflate. It stayed where it was. We said, there's that layer. This is something special. It's impervious to air, etc., etc. And that was the start of this journey. And this paper was published. It received a lot of accolades, of which one was the Times Higher Education Research Project of the Year Award. And my co-author here, Dalia Syed, is sitting right in the front over here. And here we are as a team, Lana Faraz, Dalia Syed, myself, when we got this award at the Oscar-like ceremony. And the University of Nottingham displayed the Times Higher Education Award banner on its entrance, every gate, and there are about 24 gates. Every gate had this banner, which was there for 2 years. Thus again. And then this lady from Paraguay, I don't know her, Kelly is her name. She said, I'm doing a poster for my national congress. Can you send me some literature, your papers, and give me a Skype interview, which I did. And she got a snapshot of that over there. And she made models of different types of bubbles, and she got the first prize. And then she was selected to go to the International Congress of Ocular Morphology and Human Anatomy and Human Morphology. And she won an international first prize for that layer. So it was unknown people, when they ask you for help, always find time to give that help. You never know where it might lead. People were criticizing, well, if it is there, why don't you see it on OCT? Well, then this lady from Waterloo came up and said, ultra-high resolution OCT shows the Decimus membrane at 2 lines, but there's the layer. in vivo, in living human eyes, she was able to demonstrate the layer beyond the last row of keratocytes, and that's the histological correlation. That's your layer there, and that's the keratocytes over there. So people will eventually bring evidence, people will eventually bring it forward. And I won't read all of this. This layer has helped us tremendously in many different ways, but one way which has not yet been published, but I'll show you in my next slide, is this, that Decimus membrane detachment, which we all take for granted, is actually completely wrong, our understanding. Decimus membrane detachment, like the bubbles, is of 3 types. The type 1, where you get the pre-Decimus layer, or the Duer's layer, and the membrane detaching. The type 2 bubble type, where only the Decimus has detached, and the mixed type, where both have detached and also separated from each other. The pre-Decimus layer will spontaneously detach post-cataract surgery, post-chronic edema in corneal grafts, etc. And this paper is under review in the AJO. So we will have to completely change our thinking, because these types of detachments, you can't push them back with an air bubble. You have to put a desmetectomy to release the tension, release the traction in order for it to go back. Don't achieve for reward. So don't say, I'm going to do this because I get this prize, but don't hesitate to pick up your reward if one is going. And rewards will come to you in many different ways, as it came to me. But the funny thing about awards and rewards is soon people start giving you awards because you've got so many awards. And then back because one more, and then you get another award because you've got some. And that's the way it snowballs. And that's the interesting thing. So if there is an award going, you should apply for it. You should contest for it. You should compete for it. No apply, no reply. And define and pursue your ambitions. Have a plan B. So towards the end now, this is the home stretch. Success is 9 times failure. So every time you fail, don't give up. Have a plan B. What do I do next? What do I do next? And you will find eventually you will succeed. As one's career progresses, your emphasis changes and opportunities keep presenting themselves. Peer recognition comes in various forms, and the President, Mahipal, has already narrated to you. And you don't say, I'm going to go and compete. Your peers will push you along because they say, oh, we want you to do this, we want you to do this. And you get up, and I had the good fortune of holding many different posts. That over 49 PhD MSc students, lots of publications, but you do everything with heart and mind, with passion, try to make a difference, learn with your students and learn from your students. They will teach you quite a bit. And when you've done one bit, don't sit back and relax, move on, what next? Think in terms of beginnings, not endings. Take your family along, and sometimes it's a very difficult balance, your work-life balance, but try and take them along as much as you can, and keep your patients as the center of everything you do. You have to keep them at the center. They will teach you more than anyone else can. They will reward you as no one else can. And this is what I wrote in one article for a magazine. They will think you are God. Prove them right. And I'll give you one example. This is a patient with Down syndrome. He was 46-year-old, cared by his brother, and the brother came to me and says, he spends all his time coloring these images. But look, his coloring is going all over now. He can't see. Can you help him? I've taken him to different doctors. They say he's got advanced keratoconus, he's got Down syndrome, he's got cataracts. We can't help him because he had this, he was always punching his eyes. So can you do something? I said, I'll do his cataracts, we won't do his corneas. And that's what we did, and he came back with these drawings. It was such a rewarding moment for me that he suddenly started to do what he only did in life. And we are so fortunate to be in a profession that is so rewarding on a daily basis. We make a difference to patients' lives, and that feeling is better than any award or any prize or any money can buy. And so we have to recognize how privileged we are in our profession. And the last point I make is this. When you've got it all, you must remember you have to pay back. You have to complete the circle. You can never pay back the debt you owe to your parents or your teachers. This is one debt each generation owes to the previous generation, but pays back to the next generation. By doing for your teachers and doing for your students and your children what your teachers and your parents did for you. And this is what I have encapsulated in 3 verses, which I will say and conclude. The finger that I held when I learned to walk, that showed me the words to speak the talk, that turned the pages of knowledge to teach and pointed to stars for me to reach, is part of the hand that waves me on, as I grasp the baton and move beyond into the future, living his dream, knowing how much to him it will mean. Time will pass, I'll stand on my feet. I'll extend my hand the young ones to greet, for in their future I will secure the future forevermore. Mahatma Gandhi said, there go the people, I must follow them, for I am their leader. Think in terms of beginnings, not endings, I said. Every ending provides an opportunity for a new beginning. If you enjoy what you're doing, you don't have to work a single day in your life. That is what Confucius said. Always pursue perfection, but never assume you are perfect. Perfection is an illusion. The achievement is in the pursuit of perfection. The day you think you are perfect, you will have become complacent. Thank you, and have an enjoyable journey towards perfection.